60s, for me, was about alternatives and students. Students were saying what was on our mind. Everybody and his sister played a guitar, and we were talking to each other. Caffeine was the drug, and I think it was an incredible, incredible time of spontaneity and sharing and communication. They were trying to tell us, however, that there was no war in Vietnam, and a lot of us knew that there was, or we believed that there was. Now, there was a night when I was traveling. Somehow I was stranded in San Francisco airport. And I had a morning flight on the way to Toronto, where I had an engagement in Yorkville at the Purple Onion, which was, kind of a hippie place, a student movement kind of center. And it was the middle of the night, and some soldiers came in, wheeling their buddies on stretchers and wheelchairs. And I mean, these guys, I had never seen anything like that. These guys were all bandaged and shot up. And I got to talking to some of these soldiers, and they knew that there was a war. But what it did for me, it made me question, well, who is responsible for war? I mean, is it these guys? I mean, you can't just point your finger at them, although they were there. Or maybe it's generals, maybe it's the generals who make a career of telling these guys what to do. But maybe that doesn't go far enough. I mean, who tells the generals what to do? Who points the generals and the army at somebody else? It's the politicians. But here I am flying on the way to Toronto, and it had to go farther. By the time I got to the Purple Onion, I said, who elects the politicians? It's us, right? His orders come from far away no more. They come from him and you and me. And brothers, can't you see? This is not the way we put an end to war. So it's about individual responsibility. He's 5'2", and he's 6'4". He fights with missiles and with spears. He's all 31 and he's only 17. He's been a soldier for 1,000 years. He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill, and he knows he always will kill you for me, my friend, and me for you. And he's fighting for Canada, he's fighting for France, he's fighting for the USA, and he's fighting for the Russians, and he's fighting for Japan. And he thinks we'll put an end to war this way. And he's fighting for democracy, he's fighting for the Reds. He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die. And he never sees the writing on the walls. But without him, how would Hitler have condemned him at Dachau? Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon to a war. And without him, all this killing can't go on. He's the universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away no more. They come from him and you and me. And brothers, can't you see? This is not the way we put an end to war.
Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York City. America is hurting at so many levels today. It's hard to know where to start a discussion on how it can be repaired, transformed, and healed. We desperately need ways to achieve Tikkun Olam, world healing. On today's show, we'll discuss some of the ways we can begin. We turn to one of the leaders of a people who have experienced and continue to experience their own unique American catastrophe, rejection, and trauma. As Reverend William Barber of the Poor People's Movement puts it in his new book, we are called to be a movement. God uses the rejected to lead the moral revival. They are the ones who must lead the revival for justice and love. Rejected stones make the best cornerstones. We're blessed to have Wendsler Noisie Sr. as our guest today on the Radical Imagination. He's the former chairman of the San Carlos Apache tribe, an activist who is also a member of the National Steering Committee of the Poor People's Campaign. He's resisted protest, lobbied, and borne witness by efforts by one of the largest metal and mining companies in the world, trying to build the nation's largest copper mine on the Apache holy site of Oak Flat, Arizona. Barber puts it this way: if a mining company wanted to tear down the Vatican to harvest the minerals underneath its soil, there would be a public outcry around the world. If an oil company wanted to build a drilling rig in the middle of Jerusalem, there would be protests far and wide. So why are these sacred tribal lands any different? Along with a delegation from the San Carlos Apache tribe, Wendsler joined the official launch of the campaign with Reverend Barber in 2017. In 2018, he followed a sacred journey connecting with indigenous people across the country, building relationships across faith, race, issues, and geography to find common ground in the moral struggle. With economic inequality, ecological catastrophe, and the coronavirus expanding exponentially and threatening more and more of us around the world, we can learn much about moral revival from indigenous peoples who have understood it for generations. They see their sacred role as shepherds to preserve and live in harmony with the life, land, animals, and nature they find around them. They do it with love, honor, duty, care, cooperation, and respect. Those are our best cornerstones for healing a broken world. So, Wendsler, thank you so very much for being here. We've been trying for a few months now to get you on. I'm so glad you're here. I know you're really busy, and we appreciate so much you coming and telling us what's going on out there at Oak Flat, and tell us a little about your own personal family background. Um, I know your father was a miner, right? Passed on in 1966. Um, Tell us your own personal experiences as a young man growing up in Arizona and what you're struggling for at this point right now.
Okay, well, first of all, yeah, thank you for having me on and be able to speak to so many out there and to get this message across as what you just covered. I think the most important thing that America needs to understand, like how the country was taken over. And when you come to southwest of Arizona and you come to the Apache country, uh, it's kind of the last place of America of when the colonization was taking place. And so we were able to see and hear what was happening to our other brothers and sisters as the migration was taking place. Because what people tend to forget is that, there was the Spanish War from Mexico that was coming up. There was the Russians that were coming down through Alaska, through California, and then there was the movement of the Americans coming east. And so what we say here in San Carlos is that we are old and new, meaning that we still have the old ways and we're new to this new world. And so I always describe myself as a person that's sitting on a horse and pulling the bridle and say, whoa, wait a minute, what road are we taking here? And so San Carlos came to a position of stopping and saying, let's take a look at where this road goes. And it's a frightening road that we see ahead of us. And we see the tragedy of everybody on this road, and not just Native people, everybody that we say are Americans today, because it sits on a road that's not fully a strong foundation. It's a foundation that's made by lies and by things that have happened to really play with the people's mind and really like put them in a spell, you know, from what we call capitalism, because of what America was really founded for in the first place, and what kind of went underground and still is today, as what we see happening in America with all the natural resources. So with me, I grew up with my grandfather, you know, and my uncles, where they would cry. You know, they would say that the promise was that one day we can go back to where we originated from, because in all these areas of southwest of Arizona and New Mexico, you know, my family were exiled out of those places and brought as prisoners of war. And so all these promises that were made, you know, once we become civilized, once we become good Indians, you know,
But the American government, what
yeah,
American
yeah, we would,
puts on the reservations.
yeah. In the meantime, you know, there was never that intent to ever allow us to go back.
Mm.
But the old people used to tell me when I was young that, you know, I would say, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back. And they would be, you know, some of them intoxicated because that's all they could do. That was all that was life. So like I taught people, imagine your life came to a complete stop and then putting you as prisoners. You know, what happens? You know, you got a wife, you got family, you got children. You know, it really destroys the social way of what you had prior. And so our people went through that. And so I grew up in that era. But not only that, I grew up with a mother who was raised by her grandmother. So her grandmother comes from the 1800s and was brought here in San Carlos as prisoner of war. My mother was born here in Old San Carlos, which was the concentration camp. And then, you know, then things changed to where I'm her son. And so, you know, I guess I would say that I was born into it. I was born with all the tragedy of real history, what our people went through, the promises. And I was really raised by a mother who was frustrated with the way we were and how she's seen life before and what the people were going through. And I really feel, and like my mother's no longer here, but one of the things that I did tell my mother before she passed was that, hey, you know, Mom, I said, I'm living your life. You know, I'm really not living mine. And I always remember the grin, you know, she gave me, and she said, no, you are, because of what we've seen and what is not right. She says, but even though you're living my life of what I wish for, just know that it would be better for your children, but also know that this work is going to go beyond our people. You're going to have to go and educate the rest of the world, because we see spirituality a little different. Because like I know people go back and they talk about the Bible, they talk about Moses, Jesus, and all these events that took place, but it's always past tense. They don't talk about today. They don't talk about, you know, what might have happened. So the way we see it here, the religious people here, is that there was a reason why these people left Europe to come here. So they followed like a special light, a holy light to bring them here. And we, because of the tragedy and all the stuff that were going on in Europe, the colonization, the slavery, I mean, all these ugly things that was happening there, it brought these people to this country for a reason. But what we say is that the bad also came with it because of what was happening back in Europe. And so what they said is that now the Indian people need to move forward in a spiritual way, because these people came here for a new beginning, for a new way. But collectively, if we come together, then that new spiritual blessed gift will actually be blessed in this side of the world to help the rest of the world. But see, this is, you know, like I said, that's why I need the listeners to understand that we're new and we're old. So we see it in a different format, you know.
We're getting it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to me, that's what's happening, because we've been waiting and waiting. I mean, not just the Apaches, all the other tribes as well, but we just didn't know where it was going to come from. And like being on your show today and being involved everywhere, you know, I never thought I never dreamed it would be me in that position to where I'm helping this movement, that I'm helping this voice, that I'm helping nourishing this blessed gift that we need to come. We need to let it rise to the forefront, because if we're guided by that, then the country will be sitting in on a true foundation, a real foundation. Because like they say, you know, when you make something false, it eventually catches up with you. Well, now it's caught up with America. So where we see where it is today is that we, the people, we God's children, need to come together to create that true foundation. But if we continue to live on a false one, then the legs will go out underneath us again. And so this is giving us an opportunity right now, in this minute, and this time, to build that future. And that's why I tell Reverend Barber, you know, and I tell others that I will be involved as long as it's a spiritual road. Because if you begin to make it more political and really fight it in a political arena, well, that's what's evil. That's what came, and that's what has controlled the rest of us. So, but if we have that guiding, you know, that guiding light to guide us, then we can create, you know, a foundation that is for all. Because I guess to kind of end that, you know, I see how capitalism has destroyed family values, even though they may not say it, but it's a disguise, because now, you know, there's really no upbringing the right way of your children. And we're sticking them into a colonized world, a capitalist world, and we're moving away from what is family. Because within that family comes the understanding of the earth, comes the understanding of our mother, and how it's all intertwined. But capitalism untwines that, and it disconnects us to the most things that are really valuable about spiritual and about life and about tomorrow. And now we're talking about sustainability, you know, in each of these categories. And so growing up in San Carlos, you know, I was just, you know, placed with an abundance of tragedy, you know, before me. And I was also placed with the spiritual way. And then just the way I was born. And like people here tell me that I was really meant for this work, you know, but I still, you know, at times I got to pinch myself, because, you know, I'm in these places that I have never, ever dreamed of that I would be there. But it's really mobilizing everybody, every race, make them understand, you make them see the reality and make them see the truth, you know. And then the pushback is these corporations, is those that look at their stocks, you know, their revenue base, you know. Those are the ones that are really pushing back on these movements. I mean, such as ours too. But anyway, it's just a collectively of so many different things. But what guides me is the spiritual way that I have to have, because everybody is my children, everybody is my brother, everybody is my sister. Because when the people came here in this country, there was no words of division. There was only one word that was shiki, meaning that all these people came were my relatives, you know, but we just didn't know what they were after. And they were after, you know, what the European countries wanted at that time, all the minerals, all the resources, all the values, so they could, you know, continue their strength of their country. But they just didn't know that the people who came here seen the wealth of this country and then turn on them. And, you know, so began a new America. But, you know, we go back to the religious side of it, is that there's a reason why they came here, and they were guided by a spiritual light to come here, so that it could create a new beginning for the rest of the world. And so we all have to be a part of that, from all the reference of the past of what was wrong and what happened. But if we lose that, then we're building a country no other than those other countries that destroyed so many people, and we're following the same footsteps. But anyway, that's, you know, in a nutshell, that's what I do.
That's a huge nutshell. It's a lot of information there. No, I was thinking as you were, so many thoughts crossed my mind, but as Cornel West has put it, America has become a failed social experiment, or we are failing. And what you're talking about is to go back to the beauty and promise of America, of the new world, and take from the old world the spiritual commitments and blessings that we know is right and we need to apply, and to how we interact with each other, and your people in particular are facing the fragmentation of that life. I mean, you literally, you're talking about on the, in the foundation, you're sitting on a foundation there that is being threatened by this um, uh, Resolution Copper Company, who wants to build this incredible mining facility, which is right 2 miles long, 1,000 feet deep, using block cave mining that's highly destructive, highly toxic, and you and your allies are seeking to show how far we've gone to destroy family, our health, our unity as a people, all over what? Materialism, and the trinkets and the nonsense that people are addicted to buying. So you have this incredible lesson that you're experiencing and struggling with, that we all need to really pay attention to and incorporate into our own lives. Tell us a little more about this, the corporate greed that you're experiencing firsthand and how you're fighting back.
Okay, well, it's like we go back to our forefathers and go back to Geronimo. The day that they were in line, they were put in line for their rations. A baseball rolled to one of the boys, and he told the young boy that was going to pick it up, that if you touch it, it's going to forever change your life. And so that was an example he gave to us. And what he was referring to was how life would become easy and how we would abuse what we touch. And so the point is that when I look at America, well, we got to look at ourselves first before you take it anywhere else. So I've already done that about myself. That for one is that I'm not clean because I touch these things that destroyed the earth, and I have to come to terms with that, and then eliminate where I will say to myself, enough is enough. This is enough. I don't need more than this. We are good. Well, when I travel this country, what I find with a lot of people, because I thought I was just hit all native reservations, but I got called to so many denominations, churches, met with so many different people, and what I learned from them, and I tell this to the Indian people, is that when the Indian people talk about decolonization, I ask the young people, what does that mean? Tell me, what does that mean? You have to tell me. And they get stuck in that question. And the reason why they get stuck is because we touched this modern world that has destroyed so much of Mother Earth. So we're not clean. We're it's like a candy. We're stuck on this candy. We know it's bad, but we're not giving it up. So when I talk to them, they get a little confused about what decolonization is. So I went on that. But when I journeyed, what I found out was, which was a good thing for me, was to find out that everybody needs to get decolonized, not just Native people. And I said, the oldest ones that have been in this colonization have been the white people. I said, they've been in it a lot longer because it started in Europe. And then after that, everybody else follows. And I said, now the Indian people here in North America, we're the last ones. So what happens is that when it comes to like Resolution Copper, Rio Tinto, we've all touched what is dirty. So we all kind of step back, or either we don't understand it. Because, and let me give you an example, is that when we fight in this country and we want a piece of the pie, we want more money, more money. Well, the government is going to turn and get it from the natural resources. They're going to push all these ugliness to get that extra money because they don't want to use it. They don't want to use their federal dollars that they have in place already. So this is why you have this administration, the president's administration, diluting environmental laws so that corporations can go more in and get the money. So what happens is that the money is given to those people. So what happens is that I lose those allies because now they're getting corporate funded, to the government. So that's, when we come to Resolution Copper or Rio Tinto, That's one area that, in this battle, we have to educate people across the country to be careful where the federal government is giving you this money, because all they do behind the scenes is turn around and pull it from those destructions that are happening right now in America. So what I found is that a lot of people don't know how money is distributed or how it's done, because you got the untrue statements coming from our congressional, our president leaders. They're not telling the truth to the people. And so what happens is that when they learn and they want to stand beside me on this fight, they kind of back away, because again, it goes back to that example, that
They're
ball.
benefiting to a certain extent themselves.
Yeah.
Their jobs are being dependent upon it, and the goodies that they accumulate. So
Yeah.
they're
That's
saying, well, we'll
yeah.
take it.
So that's how we see America continuing, to do what they're doing wrong, because they got everybody involved. But once we begin to understand, and once we see the realization about how it works, then you're going to find a greater support across the country for a better form of government. And then on top of that, we really need to teach our children who are going to become congressional leaders, and hold them to that importance of understanding. Because what happens is that when our kids graduate from the universities and they go on, and the corporate world gets them, then if we didn't teach them, about the world and about true ethics and sustainability, then we just gave them to the wolves. So it's important, like I tell schools, that you need to implement those before they leave these universities, so that they have some kind of integrity. They have some kind of the ability to make the right decisions and to tell, the movers that this is wrong. Because that's my experience right now happening, here in Arizona, in these mining corporations. Is, it's so sad to see it, but I know that it's going to take time, but we need to begin to implement, the true foundation, the true wisdom, the true. And that's why I told, like, not just Reverend Barber, but other people that I'm involved in, is that we have to be at the table, because we see it different, and that difference needs to be at the table in the discussion, so that we're well-rounded of what tomorrow is going to be. But if you leave us out of the equation, then you're only starting on the second chapter. And the second chapter on up that makes up America is never going to be cured until we go back to the first chapter, because that's where the greatest guilt was created and where it started. And so that's why it's hard for the United States. They don't want us at the table. They don't want us intermingling with, like, you or any other movements, because it shines a whole lot of a different light. But that's the true foundation that we need to build on.
So at the same time, remembering your roots and the connections to Mother Earth, you are saying, aren't you, that you've got to play a political role and somehow maintain that moral integrity and get in the game and push the system to respond humanely to the needs of the great masses of people? Because what we're seeing is policies coming out that are increasingly destroying people, not just Native Americans, but across the country, whether it's health or housing. Millions of people are being evicted. And I was thinking of you too. How often do you go up to Oak Flats there in your RV? I mean, you've got to be worried about getting evicted, right?
Yeah.
From your holy land.
Right.
And there are millions of people in the country who are also now, as aid is not going to be carried forward after this month to many of them. There are millions of threats of evictions. So we've got to see the same thing is happening, not just in Oak Flat, but throughout the country and throughout the world.
Yeah, and that's our biggest fight, is because these exemptions not only affect Native people, it affects the country. So what the reason why in Washington, D.C., they're upset at us here in San Carlos and the Apaches, they're upset about me going across the country and speaking, is because when it started with the Mount Graham sacred battle, when we had now Oak Flats, there are two sacred mountains here in Arizona. Well, they were both exempt from all federal laws. Now let's go backwards. If if the laws were not exempt by Congress, then we probably wouldn't even be talking here, because the United States will put the value of this place as a priority. But because the corporations wanted it, then that was all put aside, because dollars and cents, employment, and congressional leaders getting elected again. So
Right.
they are not telling the truth to the people. So like right now we're fighting a Resolution Copper, Rio Tinto here in Southwest Arizona. And what the saddest thing about Arizona is that they don't know the amount of water is going to be affected by this. So all the dewatering, and then also the acids put into the deep water, is going to contaminate this water forever. And then with the drought that we're in, and the mines buying land here and there, they're buying out all the water supplies, because what it's going to look like in the next 40 years is that the mining corporation is going to control Arizona. So if you look at our congressional leaders here and out of Arizona, it's going to get worse, because now they're mandated, because the mines now control the water. And all this is happening underneath everybody, because we're not paying attention, because we really, put our trust on these people who are elected, but they're not doing the job. So that's one of the biggest fears they bring, that when you look at Washington, they're afraid of Indian country, because again, we go back to the beginning, and then we've seen all their conniving and what they did. And if we bring it out to the forefront and educate the rest of the country, that's their biggest fear. But all we're trying to do is to make a better tomorrow, because nobody's going anywhere, and we feel like that the Creator blessed these people who came here with good hearts to a country to be saved from all the tortures that were going on in Europe, and to have the freedom of religion, freedom of speech. They came here, but along the side with other ugly tragedies to other people who were forced here. But America can really be the example of what tomorrow should be for the rest of the world. And we still have that opportunity if we stay focused on it, and if the truth comes to the surface. And that's what we're really working on, because there are laws that are good, but then you look at Congress and the president by executive order, or either by Congress exempting, that's what's destroying this country, because they're not abiding by those laws that's supposed to protect this country.
What was it? 370 treaties with Native Americans. Every single one has been broken by the government. But you have been to Washington numerous times. So you and in Arizona, you are lobbying. You are getting to the table. And what are you finding as you meet with these people, the politicians? How are you trying to reason with them? In the short run, they'll say, yeah, all that's wonderful, Wendsler, but people need jobs in the short term. Well, yeah, we'll work on this at some point, but people need jobs. They're desperate. We got to go ahead with this. So what do you say?
That goes back to capitalism, colonization, because everybody's brainwashed, and that they would fear those words coming out of somebody's mouth. And the reality is that there's so much that if they went back to the first chapter, they'll find that there's so much to provide for the people and still maintain a certain level, but maintain life. And that's what I'm saying, is that we lost the family. We lost that family structure. And I see it because it's happening to Native people. It's happening in me, where we have to take control and recontrol it, and know when enough is enough. And if we're really thinking about our children and the ones yet to be born, then it's easy to make those decisions, because we have plenty. But it's the money they're talking about. It's about the higher echelon people, the stockholders, the owners. I mean, so like what really irritates me the most is when we talk about Mount Graham, about telescopes built on a sacred site, and we talk about Oak Flats, a mining corporation. So when I speak to people in Congress, they're trying to send me to England to speak to Rio Tinto. And then when it's the telescopes project, I got to fly to Italy, France, Germany to speak to those guys. And it's crazy. I mean, you would think that this country of our leaders, would have some control over what we have as a country, but yet they sent me to these people, and then it's up to these people to decide if they're going to do the project or not. And so, as a Native person, as an Apache, and in Nan, and then as an American, I'm like, wow, here I thought I was just going to Washington, but they're sending me to speak to these corporate people because they control a lot of these people in Washington. And that's the thing that I get frustrated about, is because it seems like America, young Americans don't know that, because we're brought into this false, this unstable foundation that's not true. And that's why I'm saying that, there's plenty. Right now in Arizona, there's several mines already, that's already here. And why is it that, even though we may disagree, but they're providing the copper, they're not exempt from the environmental laws, but why is it that Resolution Copper, Rio Tinto is exempt? Why is it that on Mount Graham, they're exempt? So what we did was, again, going back, we opened the eyes throughout the country that all this time the United States was given exemptions. Even you go back to New Orleans, when New Orleans had that oil, a lot of the people there didn't even ask about exemptions, but the very few people that did bring up exemptions were suppressed. But here, because we're native, it's hard to, they suppress everybody, but for us to come out and being the first people of this country, it's a little difficult to suppress us because we have we have legitimate claim and right. And so they're trying to keep us quiet. And that's what I'm saying. If we all come together, then we know when is enough, and we know what's plenty and where it's at. Because if we ruin all this water in Arizona, there's no food.
Yeah,
there's nothing to grow.
Right, and there'll be no people. And of course, the multinational corporations don't care. They'll just go somewhere else. They don't care if half the West becomes deserted, more deserted, and there we are. Yeah. So the struggle over greed, in a sense, if you want to put it sort of in economic terms, moral terms, sociologically, insatiability, selfishness. It's never enough. You were saying there's enough minds there already, right? Mm-hmm. We've got enough of the resources. It's a matter of distributing and sharing and enjoying that without raping and pillaging Mother Earth. So this so-called American dream, the American exceptionalism, where we're sort of, this land is our land, and we're doing God's bidding here, and as we settle and colonialize, as you put it, is seen by so many people. Well, this is just the way history and life is, and we're doing what God wants, and live the good life, and so on and so on. Tough to turn around. It's very, very seductive, as all of us know. So you are lobbying in Washington. How are you proceeding? What sort of progress are you making politically, legally, against these corporations? Or is this a long, never-ending struggle?
I think politically, when I first started knocking on the doors in 1984, I was really a young man at that time, in my early 20s. I'm 61 today. But when I began to hit the hill and start bringing these issues to them, not a door would open. I got chased out from Kobe of Arizona, Kyle of Arizona, I can't remember others. We got chased out of it. They didn't want to talk to us. They didn't want to hear.
Barry Goldwater? Yeah. Were you?
No, he was already out at that.
He was earlier.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, he was here in Arizona at that time, but nobody opened the doors, and we were like blackballed. Native people have been, and so I look back to that day to today. A lot of doors have opened since then, but it took that many years to educate and keep educating, and then the turnover of people. I'm not saying everybody's bad, but it seems like the ones that are in control of a committee, they're embedded into this way of life, to hurt everybody else for their own benefits and control everybody else for their benefits, and so you see that in DC, for 36 years that I served in meeting all these people, but it took that many years to begin to see the doors open, begin to have committee hearings. There's supposed to be a consultation between the tribes and the federal government. But that didn't happen until the 1988, 1989, and during the time that President Clinton was the president, where he pushed the agency to begin to really take serious these consultations. But prior to that, the United States never exercised really those consultations. And so, and it started here in Arizona. So it began to push all over the country. And so in the political sense, you know, it took that long to get there, you know. Now today, I think we have over 30 something sponsors to our Save Oak Flat bill in the House. And I think we have like 5 or 6 in the Senate, but that's a continuing work, you know. We didn't have that before. I'm a little bit more respected than what I was before because they know that I'm not going to give up. They know that I'm educating the country, and you know, I'm speaking the truth, and I know because I'm thankful to the Creator that, you know, I have this religious way and the history of our people, but also, you know, the people wanting me to serve in the government, tribal government, to protect, you know, the rights of the people. And so thanking my people in order to get this experience to know how to argue these points, you know. And then the great thing is meeting so many people across this country. And when I say it just takes one person to make a difference, you know, in the University of Wake Forest, they used to come down to support the walk and run. Well, this young guy came about 10 years. I mean, he came, then he disappeared 10 years later, and I hadn't seen him. And so when Gosar of Arizona put the Oak Flat bill in the House to get it passed right in front of everybody, you know, this would have been a tragedy in America if it passed. But he thought he had the numbers to pass. So they called me up and I flew out to Washington and I started lobbying as quick as I could. And anyway, they told me that we didn't have the votes. We're like 3 short. And anyway, I got called to one of the congressional office and I went there and they had me sitting there like 30, 40 minutes. And I thought it was their way of keeping me from seeing any other congressional leaders. But anyway, the young man came in and he asked me, you know, Chairman Noisie, I was the chairman at that time. He asked me, how many votes do you need? I said, we need 3, but 4 on the safe side. And I was depressed because I was told that we didn't have the numbers. So he got on the line, he called around and he came back to me and he says, Chairman Noisie, he said, we got 4. He said, I want you to watch the TV because you're going to see Gosar out of Arizona scramble because they're going to let him know that 4 just pulled. And that was the Republicans. And so anyway, 4 pulled. And then he turned to me, he goes, Mr. Noisie, do you recognize me? And I looked at him and he was the chief of staff. And I said, you kind of look familiar. Then he said, 10 years ago, I was out in Arizona and I came to your sacred run. He said, so now I'm a chief of staff, but he was a graduate out of Wake Forest. So what I'm saying is that just it took that one person with his congressional boss to make a difference, you know, to step out of this colonized way, obligated to them, you know, whatever. They stepped out to do the right thing. And that's the following year is when John McCain got mad because that happened and put it as a late night rider in the defense bill and got it passed. And that's how Resolution Copper, you know, were exempt from all federal laws. And that's why they're moving the way they are right now. But this young man made a difference. So right now in Congress, it just takes those people to do the same thing. And they all know this is a bad bill. And to end that, you know, telling during this time, going up to Washington all this time was, I don't get it. You know, today, you know, you have the president of the United States and you have others bashing China. Well, right now in the legislative bill and what was outlined is that the natural resource that's going to be pulled is going to China. And then the other thing is that if there's any to build a nuclear bomb, they need that, what's that called? Uranium. And if there's any finding of uranium, that's going to Iran. And then I'm watching Russia. TV. Yeah, and I'm watching TV and President Trump is saying all this stuff, and nobody's doing nothing about this bill because Gohaba out of the House tells Resolution Copper, if you tell me 75% of the resources are going to stay here in America, then I may switch. Can you promise me this right now? And this was in a House committee meeting, hearing. and they couldn't answer. They just laughed at him.
Mhm.
And 75% is leaving this country, and it just blows me away,
But no, no, making some great points. The progress is slow, but it's going to be lasting, and we just got to stay strong on this. You notice a couple of the recent Supreme Court decisions. You see that the McGirt decision. You see how the Washington football team is changing its logo and so on. Do you see that as more symbolic, or what do you think about some of the recent Supreme Court rulings that some people have hailed as victory for Native American criminal justice rights, but others have said it's not really going to mean much for what's been going on anyway.
Well, for me, coming from a religious position, I have to speak from that. We've always been praying for people to make the right decision. We've always been praying that change will come. I mean, that's always been our big part of our prayer. And so when you see some of these changes coming, it's something that, we all have been asking for in prayer. But on the other side of prayer, you can't just depend on prayer. The other side of that is to make sure it stays in place, to make sure that the education continues to grow within the country. So we got to make these tremendous efforts, and the doors got to open more so to allow us to be at these tables, so we can be a part of building this country, because we do hold a vast amount of information about the beginning that if we're allowed, then it would be a part of building this country going forward and being more stable with these laws. Because one of the things that I'm after is like I was saying, not just for Native people, but for this country, is the United States Congress giving exemptions to corporations, with the people not even realizing what's going on. So what you were saying earlier, when I'm in North Carolina and I'm providing all this information and so many people are listening to what I'm saying, when I came back to North Carolina, I met two individuals that went back to their city and towns, and then went through because they were having a problem with water, and then they found out that exemptions were given to the company. So they were really grateful to me and the issue, because now they're researching what was exempt. And that's one thing that everybody needs to begin to research is, when not only the federal government, but state are sometimes they're working together to exempt corporations from the environmental laws. And so I see that as a big, one big issue that in America we need to attack, to assure that they're just not giving away anything at free will, because that's what's been happening. So I was happy because that, I'm sure not only North Carolina, but a lot of places are now looking at how the United States exempt these corporations, because that's what's killing us.
So yeah, and your struggle is one to open up people's eyes and to the lies and false narratives. And just as individuals have difficulties in lives that they've been denying, you're working with people therapeutically, spiritually, in a sense, to free them, even though they may not realize that's what you're doing, because they're so wedded to very self-destructive ways, both personally and for the larger culture. So these breakthroughs are difficult, they're small, but I think the new generation is getting it much more, don't you think? As you go around the country, I've noticed that myself. I mean,
No.
young people, Black Lives Matter, some of the young people, they get it. They get it. And they're solid, and they're getting a lot of pushback too. And they're going to be used, as you know, by Trump in the campaign. They're going to be seen as the terrorists and the anarchists and the provokers of violence and so on. So we're in for a tough battle here. But your voice is an extraordinarily important one.
No, I agree. It's across the board, and like I said, it comes back to the foundation of how this country was formed. That now it's collapsing, but it takes us, all of us, to build that new foundation, and we all have to step forward. And I mean, like my mother used to say to me that I have a lot of reasons to be upset. I have a lot of reasons to hate. I have a lot of reason to get back, physically at somebody. But is that who we are? Who are we? Because prior to all of this, we're very religious people, and we're intertwined with the world, meaning that we knew how everything interacted together and how important they were. And again, that's why it goes back to what it was told to me was that these people were sent from the other side of the world because of all the atrocities and all the killing that was happening there. No morals, so many things were happening, and they came here, and that's the foundation that has been excluded out in forming America, what we know as America today. And that's why it's so important that we build those essence back into it, because like I was saying, the first wave that came to America, were for the kings, for the European, royalties, they're getting all the resources and send it all back. But then, they found something different. But then they lied to the rest of the Europeans that this is a dream country, come, and they brought these other good people over with a lie. And now they had to build on that lie, and it's been building ever since. And that's why people don't know really what direction to take. And that's why it's been a corporate battle, a corporate battle of surviving. But yet, here's this other way of life, that you can still have that, but minimize that. And then, have the strength of what values are, because that's what the rest of the world needs. And being that we are what we are, we can create that prime example. But you're going to need the right people out there speaking in this country, speaking in that format, so that the younger generation, as we're speaking, like Black Lives Matters and others, they can see a true blueprint and moving forward in this country, together. But if it's done in a corporate way, and it's not going to happen. We're going to revisit the same issue down the road again. And that's why I was saying that it's so important that we are at the table so that we can help create the stronger foundation. And it's things that people may not like to hear, but it's the reality. So how do we fix it? Because chapter 1 is where it all started, and then chapter 2, 3, 4 comes. And once people understand that, then you can self-heal. Meaning that a lot of people came to America for the good reason, but didn't know they were coming to a place that had a lot of bloodshed, that there was a lot of ugliness, and a lot of fear was put against us people. And yet we embrace these people who came, after the natural resources as brothers and sisters. It's just like right now, what Resolution Copper is doing to our sacred and holy place. I'm not out there mocking them, hitting them, shooting them, or anything. They're getting ready to do that to me, because that's the place, that's where they suppress. But for me, I'm praying that something happens in a good way, that they wake up to what they're doing. But I know that that's going to take people across the board. And so that's why I said, I go back to what my mother said, but it's important that we keep that in place so that our younger generations will know, because if we're not going to give up this way of life in a government structure, then we need to understand that we can improve it. And I said, what's so crazy is everybody knows that you're always amending and changing things as we go forward. And right now, if they go back and look, there's a lot of old laws still in place in the 1800s. Even here for us people, 1800 laws still supersedes us, but nobody's made the effort to help change it. That's why we live the way we do. And that's why so many Native people are angry, because we're put in a position that we're not to get any better. We're not to get, higher in anything. We're in a position, in a mode position that leads nowhere. And that's where they want us.
Profound. It's profound message. The division and conquer of the corporations is at the core of it. And white ethnics, we all can understand the message you've given. In fact, as you were talking, your mother might have been a little bit Jewish. I mean, sound like a Jewish mother too, or a Greek mother, or a Russian mother. We can understand that message. We've got to go back to our roots, realize we've been hoodwinked, and we are destroying ourselves and the world in the process. And gosh, we've got only a minute or so. Wendsler, this is a real blessing to have you on. Tell us in the last few seconds that we have how people can get hold of you and work with you.
Well, we have a website that they can get a hold of me. Right now, I am asking all over the country for help to get a hold of the Senate and the House because there is a bill sitting there, the Safe Oak Flat bill. And also, even though you're not from Arizona, we're talking about federal land. It belongs to everybody, the way the federal government's set up. So if they can call their congressional leaders, put word in for them to support the bill and have its due process, because with them being afraid that President Trump may lose, they're moving fast. They're trying to get it all, the land transferred by December. So we're going against time right now.
All right, we're with you. Thank you so much, Wendsler, for being here today. We're going to go out with Buffy St. Marie, Universal Soldier. Peace. Take care of yourself. Be strong and take care. We'll see you soon. All the best. Thank you. Thank you again. This is Jim Vrettos on the Radical Imagination. We'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for watching us.
You're not a dream, you're not an angel, you're a man. I'm not a queen, I'm a woman, take my hand. We'll make a space in the lives that we'd planned, and here we'll stay until it's time for you to go. Yes, we're different, worlds apart, we're not the same. We laughed and played at the start like in a game. You could have stayed outside my heart, but in you came. And here you'll stay until it's time for you to go.